My wife was cheating on me while I went to help her parents, but she had no idea I installed cameras in our house, and her mom was watching everything she did. So here I am, typing this at 2 a.m. with a lukewarm cup of coffee that tastes like regret. My name's Alex, I'm 35, and I work in IT. Yeah, I'm that guy who fixes your computer when you forget your password for the 5th time this week. I live in the suburbs of St. Louis, in one of those cookie-cutter neighborhoods where everyone pretends their lawn is better than their neighbor's. 6 years ago, I thought I hit the relationship jackpot when I met Claire. Picture this. I'm at a friend's barbecue, awkwardly holding a beer and trying to avoid small talk about the Cardinals' latest losing streak, when this woman walks up and starts roasting my friend's terrible potato salad. She had this energy about her, like she could convince you to skydive just by smiling. We clicked instantly. She was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, outgoing, the kind of person who actually has weekend plans that don't involve Netflix and leftover pizza. We moved in together after a year, got married after another year. Classic American dream stuff, right? White picket fence, joint checking account, arguments over whose turn it is to take out the trash. 4 solid years. I genuinely believed I was living the life everyone talks about but rarely achieves. But here's where things get interesting, and by interesting I mean soul-crushing. About 6 months ago, something shifted. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and can tell people were just talking about you? That became my entire marriage. Claire started acting like a completely different person. First, it was a phone thing. We used to be one of those couples who didn't have phone passwords. Not because we were snooping, but because we genuinely had nothing to hide. Suddenly, her phone had more security than Fort Knox. She'd get texts and immediately flip the screen down, like she was hiding state secrets. Then came the mysterious work schedule changes. Claire works in marketing for a mid-sized company downtown, the kind of job where she used to complain about boring meetings and office politics. Suddenly, she's having these epic work sessions that last until midnight. Apparently, the marketing world in St. Louis had become incredibly demanding overnight. The intimacy disappeared faster than free samples at Costco. We went from being that couple who couldn't keep our hands off each other to roommates who high-five occasionally. When I tried to talk about it, she'd give me this look like I was being needy for wanting basic human connection from my wife. I'm not proud of what happened next, but desperation makes you do weird things. I started noticing details I'd normally ignore, like how she'd come home from these late work meetings smelling like cologne that definitely wasn't mine, or how I'd find 2 wine glasses in the sink when she claimed she drank alone while I was out with friends. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I remember because it was trash day, and I got home early to actually remember to put the bins out for once. Walking into our kitchen, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. 2 plates with dinner remnants, 2 sets of silverware, 2 glasses of wine that were barely touched. When I asked Claire about it later, she said she'd eaten alone and must have grabbed an extra plate out of habit. Now, I'm not usually a paranoid guy. I work in IT. I spend my days dealing with actual security threats, not imaginary ones. But when your wife starts treating you like a potential security breach in your own home, you start paying attention to patterns. The final straw was her reaction when I suggested we plan a weekend getaway. She looked at me like I'd suggested we rob a bank together. "Too busy with work," she said. "Too much going on. Maybe next month." Classic deflection tactics that any IT guy would recognize as suspicious behavior. So I made a decision that would change everything. Remember those security cameras I bought last year after our neighbor got broken into? They'd been sitting in boxes in the garage. Another one of my procrastination projects. Well, procrastination finally paid off. I spent a Saturday afternoon setting up 2 cameras. One in our hallway, positioned to see the front door, and another in our bedroom, hidden in the air vent. Nothing too fancy, just basic motion detection with smartphone alerts. I told myself it was for home security, but we both know that was complete nonsense. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a guy who helps people secure their digital lives, now surveilling my own wife like some kind of discount private investigator. But sometimes life puts you in situations where all your options stink, and you have to choose the one that stinks the least. The setup was simple. Motion detection would send alerts to my phone, and I could access the live feed from anywhere. Standard stuff for anyone in my line of work, but it felt like I was crossing a line I never thought I'd cross. Marriage isn't supposed to require surveillance equipment. But then again, marriages aren't supposed to involve mysterious wine glasses and late-night cologne mysteries either. Friday rolled around, and Claire's dad called asking for help with some backyard project. Perfect timing, honestly. I needed a distraction from the weird tension that had taken over our house. I asked Claire if she wanted to come along, partly because I genuinely wanted her company, partly because I was curious about her response. She declined faster than a telemarketer's pitch. Said she wanted to stay home and relax. Finally have some peace and quiet. The way she said it made it sound like living with me was some kind of exhausting ordeal. So there I was Friday evening, loading my toolbox in the car and heading to her parents' house about 2 hours away. Normal weekend. Helping the in-laws, probably going to eat too much of her mom's cooking and pretend to understand her dad's stories about fishing. What I didn't expect was to spend Saturday night staring at my phone screen, watching my marriage implode in real time through a security camera feed. But that's exactly what happened. The motion alert came through at 8:13 p.m. on Saturday. I was sitting in her parents' kitchen, helping her dad organize his tool collection. You know how dads are about their tools. When my phone buzzed, just a standard motion detection notification, the kind I'd been getting all day from cars passing by or the neighbor's cat. Except this time, when I opened the feed, I saw Claire opening our front door, and she wasn't alone. Sometimes life gives you exactly what you were afraid you'd find, served up on a digital platter with perfect HD clarity. I sat there in that kitchen, surrounded by the warmth of a normal family dinner, watching my wife welcome another man into our home like it was the most natural thing in the world. The worst part? They looked happy. Really, genuinely happy in a way, Claire, and I hadn't looked in months. And that's when I knew this story was about to get a whole lot more complicated. You know that moment when your brain refuses to process what your eyes are seeing? Like when you're watching a horror movie and the character opens the door you've been screaming at them not to open. That was me, sitting in Claire's parents' cozy kitchen, staring at my phone screen showing my wife embracing another man in our hallway. I should have closed the app, should have put the phone down, and pretended I never saw it. But it's like watching a car accident in slow motion. You know it's going to be terrible, but you can't look away. The scene unfolding on my screen was sickeningly domestic. This wasn't some rushed encounter or guilty rendezvous. Claire was wearing that silk robe I bought her for Christmas. The expensive one she said was too nice for everyday wear. She hugged this guy like they'd done this 100 times before, laughing at something he said as they walked into our living room together. My living room, with my furniture. The couch we picked out together at that overpriced furniture store where the salesman kept pushing extended warranties like they were selling life insurance. Claire's mom was bustling around the kitchen, making her famous weekend breakfast, the kind of spread that could feed a small army. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, the works. She kept humming some old song while she cooked, completely oblivious to the domestic disaster playing out on my phone screen. Her dad was in full project mode, showing me his collection of socket wrenches like they were precious artifacts. Under normal circumstances, I would have been a perfect son-in-law, nodding appreciatively and asking intelligent questions about torque specifications. Instead, I was watching my marriage disintegrate in real time while trying to look interested in power tools. The guy on my screen wasn't what I expected. No leather jacket or motorcycle, just a regular dude in khakis and a button-down shirt. He could have been an accountant or a real estate agent. The kind of guy you wouldn't look twice at in a grocery store, which somehow made it worse. They settled onto our couch with wine glasses, the good wine glasses we save for special occasions. Claire was animated in a way I hadn't seen in months, gesturing with her hands and leaning in close. This wasn't just physical. They were having actual conversations. The kind of conversations she used to have with me before everything went sideways. I tried to focus on what Claire's dad was saying about his weekend project plans, but my brain kept drifting back to the screen. They were drinking wine like they had all the time in the world, like this was their routine. Like I was the intruder in this scenario, not him. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. I'd suspected that for weeks. The worst part was seeing Claire look genuinely happy for the first time in months. When she smiled at this guy, it reached her eyes. When she smiled at me lately, it looked like customer service training. Claire's mom appeared beside me with a plate of bacon, chattering about some drama from her book club. Something about Margaret stealing someone's recipe and passing off as her own at the church potluck. Small town drama that would normally make me chuckle, but I was barely hearing her words. That's when it happened. The moment that turned a private disaster into a family crisis. Her mom set the plate down next to my phone and glanced at the screen just as Claire and her mystery guest decided to take their wine party upstairs. To our bedroom. To our bed. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire's mom stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and then something that looked like physical pain. She didn't say anything dramatic, didn't gasp or cry out, just made this small sound, like air being let out of a tire, and quietly walked back to the stove. But I saw her hands shaking as she flipped pancakes that were already perfectly golden. I wanted to explain that this wasn't planned, that she wasn't supposed to see this. But what do you say in that situation? Sorry your daughter is currently destroying my life in high definition? The dinner suddenly felt like a funeral meal. Her dad kept talking about his projects, completely unaware that his wife had just witnessed something that would change how she looked at their daughter forever. Claire's mom kept cooking with mechanical precision, but the humming had stopped. I put my phone away and tried to act normal, but normal had left the building. We were all just going through the motions now, pretending that elephants weren't doing the tango in the room. The rest of Saturday passed in a weird haze. I helped with the backyard project, installed some shelving, fixed a leaky faucet, all the standard son-in-law duties. But every interaction with Claire's mom felt loaded with unspoken knowledge. She was polite, even kind, but there was a distance that hadn't been there before. She didn't bring up what she'd seen, didn't ask questions or offer commentary, just carried on like nothing had happened, which somehow made it worse than if she confronted me directly. That evening, I sat in their guest room and saved the footage to a flash drive, not because I wanted to hurt Claire, but because I knew what came next. When marriages explode this dramatically, people tend to rewrite history to make themselves look better. I needed evidence of what actually happened, not the sanitized version Claire would inevitably create. The video was damning enough. Claire letting this guy into our house, making themselves comfortable, acting like a couple in our space. But it was also kind of sad. Two people connecting while I sat 2 hours away, helping hang outdoor lighting and pretending everything was fine. Sunday morning was awkward in that particularly American way where everyone knows something's wrong, but nobody wants to address it directly. Claire's mom made her usual elaborate breakfast, but the conversation felt stilted. Her dad sensed something was off, but couldn't put his finger on what. I kept checking my phone for more motion alerts, but the house stayed quiet. Either Claire and her friend had left early, or they were staying put until I returned. Part of me hoped they'd be gone when I got home. The other part wanted to catch them in the act and force the conversation I'd been avoiding for months. The drive home Sunday afternoon felt like heading toward a detonation. I had 2 hours to figure out what I was going to say, how I was going to handle the confrontation that was definitely coming. Do you lead with anger? Disappointment? Do you pretend you don't know and wait for them to slip up? My phone stayed mercifully quiet during the drive. No motion alerts, no dramatic revelations. Just 2 hours of highway and classic rock, giving me plenty of time to overthink every possible scenario. I pulled into our driveway around 6 p.m. to find Claire's car in its usual spot and no signs of any visitors. The house looked perfectly normal from the outside. Same suburban facade, same neat lawn, same mailbox with our last name printed in tasteful lettering. But walking through that front door felt different now. This wasn't just my house anymore. It was a crime scene. Every room held the potential for evidence I didn't want to find, conversations I didn't want to have. Claire was in the kitchen making dinner, like it was any other Sunday evening. She smiled when I walked in, the first genuine smile I'd got in weeks, and asked about the weekend with her parents. For a split second, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined everything. Maybe the camera malfunctioned. Maybe it was all some elaborate misunderstanding. Then I noticed she'd done laundry, changed the sheets, cleaned the wine glasses. All the evidence erased with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning this routine for a while. That's when I knew this conversation was going to be more complicated than I'd imagined, and my phone was about to become very important. Monday morning hit like a hangover without the fun night before. I went to work pretending everything was normal, fixing servers and resetting passwords, while my brain replayed that kitchen scene on an endless loop. You know what's worse than discovering your wife is cheating? Knowing that her mom knows too, and now you're both stuck carrying the secret like some twisted family burden. The weird thing about betrayal is how it makes you notice everything differently. Suddenly, every text Claire sent felt suspicious. Every casual conversation became potential evidence. When she mentioned grabbing drinks with work friends, I found myself wondering if work friends was code for something else entirely. But here's the thing that was really eating at me. Claire's mom's reaction. Or rather, her lack of reaction. She'd seen her daughter in our bedroom with another man, and her response was to quietly flip pancakes and pretend nothing happened. That level of compartmentalization is either incredibly mature or deeply disturbing, and I couldn't figure out which. I kept replaying that moment, trying to understand what was going through her head. Was she protecting me? Protecting Claire? Or was she just doing what a lot of people do when faced with uncomfortable truths? Choosing willful blindness over messy confrontation? Tuesday brought the first sign that the secret wasn't staying secret. Claire came home from work with this weird energy. Not guilty, exactly, but like someone who's waiting for the other shoe to drop. She kept asking about the weekend with her parents, fishing for information without being obvious about it. Had her mom seemed normal? Did her dad mention anything unusual? Was everyone in a good mood? The questions felt casual, but they were delivered with the kind of precision that comes from genuine anxiety. I played dumb because, honestly, I didn't know what else to do. Yeah, everyone seemed fine. Her mom made that incredible breakfast. Her dad showed me his entire tool collection twice. Standard weekend stuff. Nothing to report. But Claire wasn't buying it. She had this look, like when you're pretty sure you left your car unlocked, but can't remember for certain. That nagging uncertainty that won't go away no matter how much you try to rationalize it. Wednesday evening, she called her mom. I was in the next room allegedly watching Netflix, but really listening to every word of their conversation. It was one of those calls that sounds normal on the surface, but has undercurrents running through it like electrical wires. How was everyone feeling? Had they recovered from the busy weekend? Did I seem okay when I left? The questions were wrapped in casual family chatter, but the subtext was screaming. Her mom's responses were masterfully neutral. Everything was fine. Everyone was good. Alex was very helpful with the projects. Such a nice boy. The kind of pleasant, surface-level responses that could mean absolutely nothing or absolutely everything, depending on your level of paranoia. I watched Claire's face during that call, and I could see her trying to decode every pause, every inflection. She knew something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on what. It was like watching someone try to solve a puzzle when half the pieces are missing. Thursday was when the silence started feeling weaponized. Claire's mom didn't call back. Didn't send her usual random texts about grocery store sales or funny things she'd seen on Facebook. The absence of communication was louder than any confrontation could have been. Claire noticed. Started checking her phone more frequently, sending texts that went unanswered, making calls that went to voicemail. Her mom wasn't ignoring her. Exactly. She'd respond eventually, but always hours later and with responses that felt polite rather than warm. The shift was subtle but unmistakable, like when the temperature drops just enough to make you reach for a sweater. I found myself in this weird position of feeling sorry for Claire while simultaneously being furious with her. She was clearly distressed by her mom's sudden emotional distance, but she couldn't ask about it directly without revealing why she was worried. Friday night changed everything. I was in the garage pretending to organize my toolbox when Claire's phone exploded with notifications. Not the usual ding of text messages, the rapid-fire buzzing of someone having a complete meltdown via smartphone. Claire answered on the first ring, and even from the garage, I could hear her mom's voice through the speaker. Not the words, but the tone, sharp, hurt, disappointed. The kind of voice that cuts through walls and goes straight to your gut. The conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes, but those 3 minutes felt like watching a building collapse in slow motion. When Claire hung up, she just stood there holding her phone like it might explode. Then she started calling me. 18 missed calls in 20 minutes, followed by a text that made my blood run cold. "You sick piece of garbage. You showed this to my mother?" So much for keeping things quiet. Claire's mom had finally reached her breaking point, and apparently I was the villain in this story, the guy who'd violated privacy, the husband who'd turned families against each other, the one who'd weaponized technology to destroy relationships. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent weeks agonizing over whether to confront Claire about her behavior, trying to find the right way to handle the situation. Meanwhile, she'd been living a double life with the casual confidence of someone who thought they'd never get caught. Now her mom knew, I knew, and Claire knew that we both knew. The secret was out, and it was apparently my fault for not handling my wife's affair with more discretion. That night, I didn't go home. Couldn't face whatever conversation was waiting for me there. Instead, I checked into a Holiday Inn Express about 10 miles away and sat on a bed that smelled like industrial cleaning supplies, staring at my phone and wondering how everything had gotten so complicated so quickly. Claire kept calling. Text after text, voicemail after voicemail, each one more desperate than the last. But I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Needed time to figure out what I was going to say when I finally faced the music. Because, ready or not, tomorrow was going to bring a confrontation that would determine whether our marriage was salvageable or this whole mess was about to get much, much worse. Walking through my front door the next morning felt like entering a crime scene. I'd spent the night at that Holiday Inn, lying awake on scratchy sheets and listening to the ice machine cycle through its routine every 20 minutes. Around 6 a.m., I finally accepted that hiding in a budget hotel wasn't going to solve anything. Claire's car was still in the driveway, which meant she'd either waited all night or come back early. Part of me hoped she'd be gone, maybe staying with friends, giving us both space to figure out what came next. But that would have been too easy, and nothing about this situation had been easy so far. She was sitting at our kitchen table when I walked in, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Her hair looked like she'd been running her hands through it for hours, and her eyes were red-rimmed in a way that suggested very little sleep and a lot of crying. The moment she saw me, she started talking, not yelling or screaming like I'd expected, but this rapid-fire explanation that sounded like she'd been rehearsing it all night. How sorry she was, how it didn't mean anything, how she made a terrible mistake that spiraled out of control. But here's the thing about apologies. They only work when the person making them understands what they're apologizing for. Claire was sorry she got caught, sorry her mom found out, sorry I was hurt. But she wasn't sorry about the months of lies, the elaborate cover-ups, the way she made me feel crazy for noticing obvious changes in her behavior. She kept circling back to the same point. Why did I have to involve her mother? Why couldn't we have handled this privately like adults? As if I deliberately orchestrated her mom's discovery instead of it being a random accident involving breakfast plates and unfortunate timing. The conversation went in circles for what felt like hours. Claire would apologize, then get defensive, then apologize again. She'd take responsibility for the affair, then blame work stress and marriage problems. She wanted forgiveness, but also wanted me to acknowledge my role in driving her to this point. It was exhausting in a way that only relationship arguments can be, where every sentence carries the weight of years of accumulated resentment and disappointment. Then something shifted. Maybe she realized that her explanations weren't landing, or maybe the reality of losing everything finally hit her. Claire went from defensive to desperate in the space of a heartbeat. She dropped to her knees right there in our kitchen, hands clasped like she was praying some deity of failed marriages. The tears were real now. Not the angry tears from our argument, but the kind of broken sobbing that comes from recognizing you destroyed something irreplaceable. She started begging me not to post a video online, not to ruin her career, her reputation, her relationships with friends and family. She'd sign any divorce papers I wanted, Give me whatever I ask for. Just please don't make this public humiliation worse than it already was. The thing is, I never planned to post anything anywhere. The footage was evidence, not ammunition for public revenge. But Claire's panic made me realize she thought I was capable of that level of cruelty, which said something about either her opinion of me or her own guilty conscience. I told her the truth, that her mom seeing the video was completely accidental, that I had no intention of broadcasting her mistakes to the world. The footage was stored securely in the cloud, and it would stay private as long as nobody tried to rewrite history or throw me under the bus during divorce proceedings. This seemed to calm her down slightly, but she was still kneeling on our kitchen floor like she was afraid to stand up and break whatever fragile agreement we'd just reached. The strangest part of the whole scene was how normal everything looked around us. Same kitchen, same coffee maker, same refrigerator covered in takeout menus and appointment reminders. All the mundane details of shared life, completely unchanged despite everything falling apart. Claire finally stood up, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She looked smaller somehow, like the last few days had physically diminished her. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. She said she couldn't look me in the eye anymore, that she destroyed something that couldn't be repaired, no matter how much she wanted to take it back. But she asked for one thing, to let her leave quietly, without drama or public scenes or social media disasters. I agreed, partly because I wanted the same thing, and partly because I was just tired of fighting. We weren't going to fix this with more conversations, or couples therapy, or grand romantic gestures. Some things break so completely that trying to repair them just makes the damage worse. We spent the next hour working out logistics like we were dividing up office supplies after company downsizing. Who would keep the house? Who would take which car? How to split bank accounts and credit cards. The most intimate relationship of my adult life, reduced to a checklist of assets and obligations. Claire packed 2 suitcases and loaded them into her car while I sat in the living room, scrolling through my phone and pretending this was all perfectly normal. When she was done, she stood in the doorway for a minute, like she wanted to say something profound or meaningful. Instead, she just said thank you, for not making it worse than it had to be, for not turning her into an internet cautionary tale, for letting her walk away with some shred of dignity intact. Then she left, and I was alone in a house that still smelled like her perfume, but felt like a completely different place. The silence was deafening, not peaceful, but empty in a way that made every small sound seem amplified. That evening, I got a text from Claire's mom, short and to the point. Thank you for your grace during this difficult situation. I'm sorry for what she put you through. You deserve better. It was the kind of message that should have made me feel vindicated, but instead just made me sad. A family torn apart, relationships destroyed, trust shattered, and for what? A few months of excitement that would probably burn out anyway. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers were signed and filed. Claire took her car and half the savings account. I kept the house and most of the furniture, though everything felt different now, like living in a museum of a life that used to exist but was now just memory and regret. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness or the practical challenges of suddenly being single again. It was the knowledge that I'd never fully trust my own judgment about people anymore. If I could be so wrong about someone I'd lived with for years, what did that say about my ability to read anyone accurately? 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I was scrolling through a dating app at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Peak desperate bachelor behavior. The silence in my house had become so oppressive that even terrible first date small talk seemed preferable to another evening of Netflix and microwave dinners. The house felt different now. Same furniture, same layout, but like living in a movie set of my former life. Everything looked right, but felt hollow. I'd thrown myself into work with the enthusiasm of someone who discovered that troubleshooting network issues was infinitely easier than troubleshooting human relationships. My co-workers have been awkwardly supportive. Lots of invitations to grab drinks and vague offers to help. The dating app thing started as a joke. My buddy Mike set up the profile to get me out of what he called my hermit phase. Standard divorce guy photos, me looking reasonably happy at some company picnic, a hiking shot that made it look like I had hobbies. I'd been swiping mindlessly for 20 minutes when her profile popped up. Different name, different photos, but unmistakably Claire. She cut her hair shorter and was wearing clothes I'd never seen before. But those were definitely her eyes staring back at me. My first instinct was to screenshot everything, but I realized I didn't know who to send it to. So I just sat there reading her dating profile, like it was evidence in a criminal case. The bio was what really got me. This carefully crafted paragraph about learning from past mistakes and being ready for someone who could appreciate genuine honesty and communication. It was like reading a parallel universe version of our relationship. The final line hit me like a punch. In life, I lost someone who never raised their voice at me. Because the most terrifying silence is the one that leaves nothing behind. Part of me wanted to be angry about the revisionist history. But mostly I just felt sad for both of us, for what we'd lost, for how completely we'd failed at something we both wanted to succeed at. I closed the app and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about that line about silence, about how she'd characterized my response to discovering her affair. The next morning brought a weird sense of closure. Seeing Claire trying to rebrand herself made me realize how completely our old life was over. She wasn't the person I'd married anymore, and I wasn't the person who'd married her. I deleted my dating profile that afternoon, not because seeing Claire had traumatized me, but because I realized I wasn't ready to pretend to be someone new yet. Instead, I started therapy. The therapist helped me understand that Claire's affair wasn't really about me being inadequate. Sometimes people make destructive choices because they're running from something inside themselves, and no amount of being a better husband could have fixed whatever she was running from. 6 months later, I ran into Claire's mom at the grocery store. We had one of those awkward conversations that happens when people who used to be family suddenly aren't sure how to relate to each other anymore. As we were parting ways, she said something that stayed with me. You handled everything with more dignity than most people would have managed. Claire knows she lost something irreplaceable, even if she can't say it out loud. It wasn't the vindication I thought I wanted, but it was something close to peace. Not the Hollywood ending where everything works out perfectly, but the real-world resolution where people acknowledge that some things can't be fixed, only survived and learned from. These days, I live in the same house, but it feels like mine now instead of ours. I've got new routines, new habits, even some new furniture that doesn't carry the weight of shared memories. The truth is, marriage only works when both people are committed to making it work. When one person checks out emotionally and starts looking elsewhere for connection, all the surveillance equipment and couples therapy in the world won't save what's already been lost. I still have that flash drive with the video footage, tucked away in my desk drawer like evidence from a case that's already been closed. For now, it's just part of my story. The chapter about learning that sometimes the best way to handle betrayal isn't with anger or revenge, but with quiet dignity. And sometimes that's enough.